Hey guys, FlexTanger here to talk about Call of Duty. More specifically, the whole story of Simon Ghost Riley. I noticed that a lot of videos and wiki pages that talk about Ghost feel more abridged than anything. Important details are usually omitted, and in several cases, there are inaccuracies about some of his missions, and most importantly, how exactly he was recruited into Task Force 141. So this will aim to be the most in-depth, accurate video about the origins of Simon Ghost Riley. I will warn you that the subject matter and some of the imagery in this video will be offensive and disturbing. So with all of that out of the way, let's begin. This is the story of Simon Ghost Riley. Born in Manchester in the early 80s, with no exact date of birth on record, he was the son of Mr. and Mrs. Riley and the brother of Thomas Riley, otherwise called Tommy. His mother was a very sweet woman who was too nice and forgiving for her own good. His father was a whoremonger, abuser, and drug addict. He lived for the British punk rock scene of his youth, a scene that represented challenging authority that preaches obedience and morality and the reflection of its own hypocrisy of imperialist immorality, but Simon's father wasn't that deep. He only latched onto the punk scene for the sake of being able to blame others for his own failures and shortcomings. He had a quip for anyone who even remotely got their shit together in life. You make a decent amount of money, you were a big shot. You wore any kind of uniform, you were a baby killer for the queen. The things he would say to make himself feel better and sleep peacefully at night after cheating on his wife and abusing his children. But hey, at least he wasn't a big shot or a baby killer for the queen. One night, Mr. Riley decides to take Simon for a night on the town to make a real man out of him. While they were out watching a very loud and very hard to listen to performance from the title punk band on stage, Mr. Riley leaves Simon to pursue an intoxicated woman. While looking for his father, Riley eventually stumbles into a public restroom where he can hear his father having sex with a prostitute. The prostitute drops a syringe with his father's drugs in it, at which point Mr. Riley gets angry and slits her throat. Realizing that he was being observed by Simon, and also seeing that Simon was noticeably jarred by what he witnessed, Mr. Riley tries to calm Simon down by telling him not to worry, because she was only a prostitute and a drug addict, and she was going to die one way or another. He also tried to cheer Simon up by pointing out that she died with a smile on her face, and in Simon's state of shock and inability to process the moment of trauma, his father coerced him into getting through it by laughing. A few nights later, his father teased him with a very large snake, knowing about Simon's fear of reptiles. Simon's little brother Tommy lacked any fear of reptiles, which only encouraged his father to tease Simon even more, and then uncomfortably kiss him. A short time later, his brother frightened him with a skull mask while holding a knife, letting Simon know he was going out with Dad, presumably for another father-son ritual that would possibly end with some poor drug addict getting her throat slit. Simon pushed really hard to successfully repress these memories of trauma, though the vague imagery of such never truly left his subconscious. After September 11th, 2001, Simon signed up to join the army in pursuit of something in the realm of anti-terrorism. After he was recognized for being gifted, he was urged to submit for SAS selection. He of course excelled, and after a couple years of being dedicated to the craft, in January of 2003 he took leave to check in on his family. His mother was distraught, with Simon's father still being a whoremonger drug addict, and his brother now becoming a drug addict himself. Simon, as the only one with any structure and stability in his life, took it upon himself to set his family straight. He helped his mom, he ripped his brother from a squat house, even having to fight off his young brother's druggy friends who Tommy allegedly owed drugs to. After spending some time doing this, he then decided to confront his father. Who, of course, immediately started picking at Simon's valor to ward off any insecurities he felt in his son's presence. Insults like baby killer for the queen set Simon a little over the edge, and he decided to beat the living shit out of his father. He made sure his father would never return to bother his mother or brother again. His brother was clean and stable and on his way to a healthy relationship with a girl named Beth. After addressing his family's issues and stabilizing what he could, he went back on assignment. And in his time away, his brother stays off drugs and marries Beth in 2006. Shortly after, she gives birth to Simon's nephew, Joseph, and his mother remains back on her feet and happy, and his father remains a sack of shit, who ends up getting diagnosed with cancer. The year is now 2009. Simon, originally supposed to go to Iran, is pulled off of that operation for another. The United States were asking for assistance from the SAS in taking down the Zaragoza drug cartel, which was headed by Emmanuel Roba. The cartel allegedly was leaving open a back door in South America to the Afghans who supplied them their heroin. This group of Afghans allegedly included jihadist terrorists, and American Special Forces Major Vernon had already been on an operation attempting to bring down the cartel. He was the only one of a 12-man team that made it out. And with his experience and willingness to try again, he was given the responsibility and authority of choosing his own specific task force. He handpicked Simon for his legendary reputation, and then collected the rest of his team of American Special Forces and Navy SEAL operatives: Sparks, Cumberland, Washington, and Sykes. On the night of the drop, October 30th, 2010, Sykes was reportedly paranoid about someone possibly sabotaging his equipment. But Sparks, along with the others, didn't think anything of it. Unfortunately and coincidentally, the night of the drop, his chute failed, and he died on impact. And before letting anybody else get paranoid themselves, and wanting to prevent any lost time, Major Vernon made sure to set their bearings straight. Chutes fail, shit happens, he says. Now let's get our gear and get in town while we still have time to blend in. While getting settled in, the next day Sparks admits in passing that he's into underage girls, while Simon and Vernon discuss the next night's operations. Simon wants to use the De los Muertos celebrations and parade of people as cover for moving in on the cartel compound. Vernon is uneasy about the idea because of the possibility of civilian casualties. They somewhat agree, and then they discuss the means of which to torture Emmanuel Roba for information and to obtain a list of names and whether or not he will actually talk. That night, the crew went out for a drink to further blend in. While shooting the shit, Simon is asked what his story was and why he was picked. He told him how he joined after 9/11, was good at what he did, was encouraged to go SAS, continued to be the best of the best, and Vernon basically handpicked him to babysit the rest of the boys and make sure the mission was a success. After the boys called Simon generic, the guys are approached by a dwarf prostitute with the proposition of a gangbang, of which Simon declines. While the boys head out with the dwarf prostitute, Simon goes and tracks Cumberland as he strays from the group, goes out on his own, and makes a secret phone call. The next day, November 1st, Simon tells Major Vernon about Cumberland. Vernon says, "Don't worry about it, I'll keep an eye on Cumberland during the operation." That night, they put on disguises, blend into the crowd, and prepare. Shortly after moving onto the compound and taking down a few hostiles, they meet back up to find that Cumberland and Major Vernon are not only missing, but captured. After they are taken inside the mansion, Washington, Sparks, and Simon split up and make their way inside to find Cumberland and Vernon. Simon hears a distressful cry. He opens the door to find Cumberland having been tortured and his genitals removed. While untying Cumberland and asking what happened, he is interrupted by Vernon, who tells Simon Cumberland was a spy, embedded by the CIA to monitor the operation, more specifically to monitor Vernon. Vernon goes on to say that Cumberland must have caught him in the act of sabotaging Sykes' equipment. Vernon then kills Cumberland. The CIA feared that before Vernon escaped his last encounter with Roba, that he was successfully brainwashed. And rather than escape, he was actually released for the purpose of recruiting, which as it turns out was not only true, but why he handpicked Simon, for hopes of capture, brainwash, and recruitment. While apprehending Simon, Simon gets loose, and while escaping, he is shot by Roba. Simon, Washington, and Sparks are captured. Roba's men try to break Simon. They make him fight the others, trying to push him to kill. He is tortured, he is raped, he is brainwashed. He is offered the soft skin of a woman, or the skull he is told belongs to his mother. He rejects the comforts provided by Roba and clings to the skull. He refuses to break. The inability to break Simon and brainwash him disappoints the Afghan importers whom Roba tries to impress with a demonstration in which Simon was supposed to kill Vernon in a fight, but he refused. Which of course embarrassed Roba, so he then orders to have the men killed. Washington and Sparks get word of their planned execution, so they tell Simon they are escaping. Simon tells them there's no time for his escape and they should leave without him. They leave, and soon after, guards drag Simon outside, put him in a coffin next to Major Vernon's corpse. After being buried, he rips off the jaw of his old major and uses it to wedge and grind his way through the wooden boards of his coffin for 13 hours. He breaks through. After blindly wandering and blacking out, he awakes to find he made his way into Texas. And within 2 weeks, he is back in the UK. Simon naturally goes under physical rehabilitation and psychiatric observation. He is required to go through therapy and is told he will not be put back on the line until his shrink gives him a clean bill of mental health, which doesn't seem likely considering he has post-traumatic nightmares. One in particular where he threatens to take advantage of a bartender's daughter, he goes on a killing spree of old colleagues, and he is rooted on by Roba, saying things like, "I taught you good. You can't kill me, I'm in your head." His struggle with PTSD continues for the next year. One day, while visiting his family, he gets a surprise visit from Sparks. He tells his family Sparks is an old friend. He excuses himself, and he and Sparks go out to get a drink. While chatting, they of course bring up Roba and dealing with the PTSD after returning home, though Sparks shows appreciation for Roba, saying that Roba freed him and uncaged his mind. Simon reluctantly agrees with the notion but becomes uneasy and concerned for his friend. Later, while walking Sparks home, Sparks reveals he and Washington have been working for Roba, in a way, for the last year. While training Afghans to police themselves in their recent deployments, they have been leaving a back door open for the Afghan heroin trade to make its way to Roba. He says the money's good, and when the plans come together, they're going to go back to be with Roba. He explains that the operations go all the way up the chain of command, and he asks Simon if he wants to join. In the midst of their conversation, Sparks spots a woman and tries to rape her. He says he's going on deployment soon, so he deserves it. He asks Simon to help him get into the building, but Simon inevitably talks him out of it, calms him down, and gets him inside his place. After he gets Sparks to lie down, he realizes that Sparks is too far gone. They get into a confrontation, but are interrupted by Washington. Simon escapes, goes home to find that Washington has killed his entire family after Sparks took him out for a drink. Struggling in the moment, he's hit with images of Roba and contemplates suicide. Then, predicting the next place that they would hit, he goes to his therapist's apartment, but she's already gone. And Sparks and Washington were already waiting on him. They attempt to kill him, but they fail. Simon knows that his father is probably the next target, but he has several questions to ask his father before he dies. He goes to the hospital and he asks his father about dreams he had before ever joining the service. He also asks him about glimpses of memories and images that he came to recollect while being tortured. His father demands a bargain. If I tell you, you kill me and end my misery. His dad goes on to jog Simon's repressed memories, including the time he killed the hooker in front of Simon. He laughs and chuckles and calls Simon weak, and as Simon leaves, his dad yells at him for not keeping his end of the bargain. Not long after, Sparks and Washington walk in looking for Simon. They ask Mr. Riley if he has talked to his son recently. Mr. Riley gives them both the finger and tells them to go fuck themselves. And they give him the death that he was looking for. With Washington and Sparks' connection to a corrupt and powerful people, they are waived as suspects and successfully have framed Simon for the killing spree of Simon's friends and family, as just another wacko soldier pushed over the edge by PTSD. Simon strikes out on his own and starts planning. He knows about Washington and Sparks' upcoming deployment. The night before, he sneaks onto their compound, searches records for names and barracks, then he sneaks in, uses Sparks' knife to slit Washington's throat in his sleep, throws the knife in the trash can, and he kidnaps Sparks. Sparks is dragged into Simon's old apartment. He frees himself and prepares to strike Simon, but Simon peeks the corner with a Beretta and shoots Sparks square in the mouth, killing him and obliterating any chance of dental identification. He plants his dog tags on Sparks' bodies and sets the apartment on fire. The next morning, Washington's body is found during reveille, and Sparks' knife is found in the trash can, with Sparks, of course, nowhere to be found. An SAS soldier alerts the American Special Forces Colonel Barber. When the soldier suggests he would call CID, Colonel Barber tells him not to and to just stay in the barracks, and that he would take care of CID and watch the security footage and file the report for the investigation. The next day, it is being reported that Simon Riley, who was the main suspect in killing his friends and family, committed suicide after setting fire to his apartment. Colonel Barber, reading the headlines and watching the security footage, knew exactly what had happened. But he decided to call CID, tell them case was closed, and cover for Simon, so the world would go on believing that Sparks killed Washington, and for the world to also go on believing that Simon Ghost Riley killed his family and killed himself. Colonel Barber had plans for Simon, and he knew where Simon was going to next. As Simon heads back to South America and tracks down Roba's right-hand man, Gilberto, he takes him down to the old abandoned torture compound, and he puts him in a room known as Level 3. Gilberto says that he will never talk, but that was a lie. He tells Simon the location of Roba, and the computer system that has the list of names and other information Simon was after, and any key passwords he would need. Simon sneaks onto Roba's residential compound, starts taking out guards one by one. He then sets up explosives that give off the impression of a full-out invasive task force. Roba is awakened and being told that his helicopter has been destroyed. Not able to escape by air, they patrol the hallways to get out of the compound and head out on foot. They are met by Simon. Simon explains how Gilberto spilled the beans on everything, including his location. Only thing left to do was kill Roba. They get into a firefight, which ends with Roba trying to run away then being shot in the back. A few choice words are exchanged, and Simon blows Roba's goddamn head off. But the fight's not over. He spends the rest of the night surviving a horde of the remaining Zaragoza cartel security forces, and inevitably setting fire to the mansion. While walking away from the burning rubble, he is met with a helo and a new friend. Many people have been under the false impression that an Army Ranger who goes by the name General Shepard was the individual who recruited Simon Ghost Riley into Task Force 141. But the truth is, he was recruited by someone you have never heard of until now. A United States Special Forces colonel by the name of Barber.